The knock came at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, 3 days after I'd walked out of the only job that had ever felt like home. And when I opened the door, my boss, Mr. Robert Chen, a 72-year-old man who rarely left his office before sunset, stood there in the rain, his silver hair plastered to his forehead, his always immaculate suit soaked through. And before I could speak, before I could even process the shock, he said in a voice that trembled with something I'd never heard from him before, "Emma, I accepted you quitting, but I will never accept losing you." The words hit me like a freight train, and suddenly I was 16 again, standing at my parents' funeral, alone and terrified. Because that's what this felt like, another ending I wasn't ready for. Another loss I couldn't afford, but this time someone was choosing to stay, and I didn't know what to do with that. 3 weeks earlier, my life had been predictable, in the best way possible. I was Emma Hartley, 28 years old, senior designer at Chen & Associates Architecture, a small firm tucked into a converted brownstone in the historic district, where every brick seemed to hold a story, where Mr. Chen himself had built something beautiful from nothing after immigrating 40 years ago with just a drafting pencil and a dream. I'd been there for 6 years, ever since I graduated with a degree I'd paid for myself, working 3 jobs while raising my younger brother, Danny, after our parents died in a car accident when I was 19 and he was just 9 years old. Mr. Chen had hired me when bigger firms wouldn't even look at my portfolio, had seen something in my work that I didn't even see in myself, and over the years, our relationship had evolved into something I couldn't quite name. He was demanding but patient, critical but encouraging, distant but somehow always there when I needed guidance. Like a lighthouse I didn't know I was navigating toward until I found myself in his steady light. The office was my sanctuary, a place where I could lose myself in blueprints and elevations, where I could create beauty and structure in a world that had given me chaos and loss, where the smell of trace paper and strong coffee meant stability, and where Mr. Chen's rare smiles felt like hard-earned treasure. But then, 2 months ago, Danny collapsed at school, my baby brother, who was now 19, a sophomore in college, studying engineering. The kid I'd raised on mac and cheese and determination, whose college essays I'd edited at 2 a.m., whose basketball games I'd never missed, even when I was drowning in deadlines, and the diagnosis came like a winter storm, a rare autoimmune condition that was attacking his kidneys. Treatable but requiring intensive care, constant monitoring, medications we couldn't afford even with my insurance, and most importantly, someone there with him, because he was scared in a way I hadn't seen since he was 9 years old, asking me why Mom and Dad weren't coming home. I tried to balance it, all the hospital visits before dawn, the full days at the office, the evenings researching treatment options and fighting with insurance companies, the nights sitting by Danny's bedside in our small apartment, watching him sleep restlessly, making sure he was breathing, making sure he was still here, but I was shattering like glass under pressure, cracking in ways that couldn't be glued back together. I started missing deadlines, something I'd never done. I snapped at junior designers who didn't deserve it. I submitted work that was competent but not passionate. And I saw the concern in Mr. Chen's eyes during our weekly reviews, though he never said anything, just watched me with that inscrutable expression he wore like armor. The breaking point came on a Wednesday when I got a call from the hospital while presenting a design to clients. Danny had had a severe reaction to a new medication. His blood pressure had dropped dangerously low, and I needed to come immediately, and I just stood there in the conference room, phone in hand, looking at Mr. Chen and the clients and the presentation I'd spent weeks on, and I realized I couldn't do this anymore. Couldn't split myself into pieces and expect any of them to be whole. I excused myself, drove to the hospital with tears I didn't let fall until I was alone in the car, and sat with Danny for 6 hours until he stabilized, his hand in mine, his face so pale against the hospital sheets. And I made my decision. The next morning, I went to Mr. Chin's office, that beautiful corner room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the old oak trees, where architectural models lined the shelves like miniature dreams, where he kept a photo of a young woman I'd never asked about tucked discreetly beside his computer, and I handed him my resignation letter. 2 weeks' notice typed on paper that felt like surrender. He read it silently, his face unreadable, those dark eyes that had reviewed thousands of my drawings now scanning the few sentences that ended 6 years of my life. And then he looked up and said simply, "You don't need to give 2 weeks. Take care of what you need to take care of, Emma. Your position will be handled." His voice was professional, measured, exactly what I expected, and somehow that made it worse. Made it feel like I was just another employee leaving, just another name on a roster, and I nodded because I couldn't trust my voice, gathered my things in a box that felt too small for 6 years of memories, said goodbye to colleagues who hugged me with confused sympathy, and walked out into the afternoon sun feeling utterly, completely alone. For 3 days, I threw myself into Danny's car, organizing his medications into a color-coded system, meal prepping according to his new dietary restrictions, researching financial aid and disability benefits, setting up a corner of our living room as a recovery space with comfortable pillows and the good lighting, trying to build a life raft from the wreckage, and I didn't let myself think about the office, about the projects I'd left behind, about the career I'd worked so hard for now dissolving like morning fog, about Mr. Chen's face when he read my letter, about how much it hurt to walk away from the only professional home I'd ever known. Danny kept asking if I was okay, and I kept lying and saying yes, because that's what I'd always done. That's who I'd been since I was 19, the strong one, the one who figured it out, the one who didn't break even, though I was breaking now. Even though I lay awake at night wondering how I'd pay next month's rent without my salary, how I'd find another job that would accommodate Danny's needs, how I'd rebuild what I'd just destroyed. Then came that Tuesday night, that knock at 9:47 p.m., that impossible image of Mr. Chen standing in the rain, saying words. That didn't make sense. I accepted you quitting, but I will never accept losing you. I stood there, frozen. And he continued, his voice rough, with emotion I'd never heard from him. "May I come in, Emma? Please. I need to talk to you, and I should have done this 3 days ago, 3 months ago, maybe 6 years ago, but I'm doing it now." I stepped aside numbly, and he walked into my modest apartment so different from the elegant office, with its second-hand furniture and Danny's textbooks scattered on the coffee table and medical bills stacked on the kitchen counter. He stood there, dripping on my carpet, looking around with eyes that seemed to be taking in every detail of my life outside work, the life he'd never seen. "Mr. Chen, you're soaking wet. Let me," I started. But he held up a hand, and when he spoke, his voice cracked in a way that stopped my heart. 23 years ago, I had a daughter named Lily. She was brilliant, studying architecture at Princeton, wanted to join the firm, and I was so proud, so focused on building the business to leave to her, that I didn't notice she was struggling, didn't see that she was depressed, didn't make time when she called, saying she needed to talk because I was always in meetings, always on deadlines, always building a legacy for someone who needed a father, not a legacy. The words fell like stones into still water, and I couldn't breathe as he continued. She died by suicide in her junior year. And I found out from a phone call from the university, not from her, because I'd made myself unavailable to the person who mattered most. Tears were streaming down his face now, mixing with the rain, and this man, who I'd never seen as anything but composed and controlled, was breaking open in front of me. For 23 years, I've lived with that regret, thrown myself into work to avoid the grief, kept her photo on my desk where I could see her and punish myself with what I lost. And then 6 years ago, a young woman came into my office with a portfolio and a story I recognized, raising a younger sibling alone, working multiple jobs, refusing to give up despite impossible odds, and I saw in her the strength my Lily didn't have, the resilience I didn't teach my daughter, and I hired her because I saw a chance, maybe, to do better. I was crying now too, understanding dawning like sunrise. Mr. Chen, but he kept going. The dam broken. Over these 6 years, Emma, you became more than an employee to me. Watching you grow as a designer, seeing your dedication, your kindness to junior staff, the way you fought for your designs but listened to feedback, the way you brought Danny to the office on holidays and he'd sit in the conference room doing homework while you finished projects. You became the daughter I lost, and I never told you because I'm a foolish old man who doesn't know how to express what he feels, who hides behind professionalism and distance because it's safer than admitting I care. He sat down heavily on my couch, looking smaller and older than I'd ever seen him. When you handed me that resignation letter, I saw my daughter again, saw someone struggling and suffering alone, and I did the same thing I did 23 years ago. I kept professional distance. I didn't ask questions. I didn't offer help. I let you walk away, and for 3 days I've been sitting in my office hating myself, knowing I'm making the same mistake again, knowing I'm choosing pride and propriety over love and connection, until tonight, when I realized I couldn't live with losing another daughter. Not when I have a chance to do what I should have done all along. The apartment was silent except for our crying, and Danny emerged from his room, pale and confused. Emma, what's going on? And I couldn't speak, couldn't process what I was hearing, couldn't reconcile this vulnerable, broken man with my composed boss. Mr. Chen stood up, wiped his eyes, and looked at Danny with a gentleness I'd rarely seen. You must be Danny. I'm Robert Chen, Emma's boss. No, Emma's friend, I hope. I'm here because your sister is too proud and too strong to ask for help, which is admirable and infuriating in equal measure. And I'm here to tell her that I'm not accepting this situation. He turned back to me, and his voice was firm now, steadier. Emma, I'm 72 years old. I have more money than I'll ever spend. I have a company that runs smoothly because you helped build its systems, and I have a hole in my heart where my daughter used to be. I can't bring Lily back, but I can honor her memory by being there for you the way I wasn't there for her. Danny needs medical care. You can't afford. I can. You need flexibility to be with him. I can provide that. You need someone to share this burden because you've been carrying everything alone since you were 19. I'm here, if you'll let me be. I was shaking my head, pride and fear warring inside me. Mr. Chen, I can't accept your money. I can't be your charity case. I can't. And he stepped forward, placing his hands on my shoulders with a father's gentle firmness. Emma, listen to me. You're not a charity case. Your family, the family we choose, is just as real as the family we're born into, sometimes more so. For 6 years, you've given me purpose, reminded me why I loved architecture, filled an office that felt like a mausoleum with life and energy, and you've never asked for anything in return. Let me do this. Let me help Danny get well. Let me be the grandfather he doesn't have, the father figure you've been without, the family you both deserve. Not as your boss says, someone who loves you both and can't stand by watching you struggle alone when I have the means to help. Danny spoke up then, his voice weak but clear. Emma, maybe we should let him help. You're exhausted. I'm scared you're going to collapse. And then what happens to me? If Mr. Chen is offering, if he cares about Ubat, Us, maybe that's not charity. Maybe that's just what family does. And something broke open in me then. The wall I'd built at 19, when I decided I had to be strong enough for two. When I decided asking for help was weakness. When I decided I was alone, and always would be. And I collapsed into Mr. Chen's arms, sobbing like I hadn't sobbed since my parents' funeral. And he held me like a father holds a daughter, steady and sure and safe. And he whispered, I've got you. You're not alone anymore. You've never been alone, I just failed to show you that. Let me fix that. Let me be what you need. The next weeks were a revelation and a healing I didn't know was possible. Mr. Chen hired the best specialists for Danny, paid for treatments our insurance denied, set up a trust fund for ongoing medical expenses, and did it all with such quiet dignity that it felt less like charity and more like what it was, love in action. He came to the apartment 3 times a week, bringing dinner and sitting with Danny while I ran errands or just took a walk to breathe, and I'd come back to find them discussing engineering concepts or watching basketball games. Danny laughing in a way he hadn't laughed in months, this grandfather figure he'd never had filling a space I didn't realize was empty. Mr. Chen shared stories about Lily, her love of sketching birds, her terrible jokes, her passion for sustainable design, and, in sharing her, he brought her back to life in a way, and Danny and I learned about the sister we'd gained through memory and love. Slowly, Danny improved, the new medications worked, his color returned, his strength rebuilt, and I learned the hardest lesson of my life, that accepting help isn't weakness, it's wisdom, that family isn't just blood, it's choice and commitment, that the walls we build to protect ourselves sometimes just imprison us in loneliness. Mr. Chen asked me to return to the firm, but in a new role he'd created, partner, with equity and flexible hours, and the understanding that Danny came first, always, and, when I protested I hadn't earned it, he said firmly, "You've earned it 1,000 times over. And this isn't charity, it's good business. You're the most talented designer I've worked with, and more importantly, you're my daughter now, and I take care of family." The morning I returned to the office, 6 weeks after I'd left with a box of belongings and a broken heart, I walked in to a surprise. The entire staff had signed a banner reading "Welcome Home, Emma," and on my desk was a framed photo, me, Danny, and Mr. Chen, at Danny's hospital discharge day. 3 people who'd found each other across grief and time and need. 3 people who'd become family, not by blood, but by choice. Mr. Chen stood beside me as I took it in, and he said quietly, "I couldn't save Lily. I'll carry that regret until my last breath. But I can be here for you and Danny, and in doing that, I honor her memory and heal something I thought was permanently broken. You gave me that gift, Emma, the gift of second chances, the gift of family, the gift of purpose beyond work. I accepted you quitting because that was your choice to make, but I couldn't accept losing you because that would have been my failure. Again, and I've learned that some failures we can't afford, some connections we can't let go, some people we have to fight for even if it means being vulnerable and scared and showing up in the rain to bare our hearts." I turned to him with tears streaming down my face, and I said the words I'd needed to say since that night he appeared at my door. "Thank you, Dad," and the way his face transformed grief and joy and healing all at once told me that those words healed him as much as his actions had healed me. Danny started back at college the next semester, healthy and strong, with Mr. Chen attending his first basketball game and cheering louder than anyone in the stands. This elderly architect who'd found a grandson to spoil and guide. The firm thrived with our partnership, my innovation, and his experience creating designs that won awards, and more importantly, made people's lives better, which was always the point. And every Friday, the 3 of us had dinner together, sometimes at fancy restaurants, where Mr. Chen insisted on ordering too much food, sometimes at our apartment, with takeout and basketball on TV, sometimes at his beautiful house where he taught Danny to play chess and showed me Lily's old sketchbooks, sharing her with us like precious gifts. The anniversary of Lily's death came 6 months after that rainy night, and the 3 of us visited her grave together. Mr. Chen's first time bringing anyone with him, and he introduced us to the daughter he'd lost, telling her about the family he'd found, asking her if she was proud of him for finally doing what he should have done years ago, choosing connection over fear, choosing vulnerability over distance, choosing love over regret. as we stood there among the autumn leaves. Mr. Chen put one arm around me and one around Danny, and he said, "Lily, these are my kids now. I hope you don't mind sharing your old man. I think you'd like them. I think you'd understand that love doesn't divide when we add to it, it multiplies. And there's room in my heart for all of you, always." And I realized then that the boss who came to my door that rainy night wasn't just refusing to lose an employee. He was fighting to save us both, to build the family he'd lost, to transform grief into love and regret into redemption. And in doing so, he'd taught me the most important lesson I'd ever learned, that quitting a job is just changing where you work, but losing family, whether by blood or by choices, losing a piece of your soul. And the people who refuse to let that happen, who show up in the rain and bare their hearts and offer everything they have, not for obligation, but for love, those are the people who change our lives, who become our anchors, who transform us from survivors into people who thrive, from individuals struggling alone into families that carry each other through every storm.